The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, thank you for joining us, everyone. We're going to be starting in a couple minutes here. Thank you to everyone that's participating in our webinar today. This is Tax 1099 for our QuickBooks users. We're going to be talking about specifically QuickBooks imports and what things look like from getting your integrations set up. This webinar is going to be recorded. We'll have the URL at the end of this slide deck here. Go ahead and get started with some of the bios. We've got Marcus Parsons with us today. He is a CPA, formerly with PwC. He joined Zenwork this year, and he focuses solely on building relationships with our accounting and bookkeeping professionals. He is our accounting channels director. He has a lot of knowledge about QuickBooks, and he's excited to talk to you today. We also have Ed Pratt. He's our Chief Operating Officer here at Zenwork Incorporated. He has 19 years of experience in compliance outsourcing, including human resources, payroll, and tax. He's assisted our Tax 1099 clients for the past 4 years. He's got a lot of knowledge to share with us today. Before we get started, though, here's a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions for us, you can go ahead and ask those in the chat box, which is on the right side of your screen. We'll be answering those throughout the session, and then we'll also have a question and answer portion at the end. If you have any trouble with your audio, right here on your screen, you see the support number for GoToWebinar, or you can also use this URL to get some support. So today we're going to be talking about this season's Tax 1099 updates. We've got some new navigation items, some new form options. We're going to talk about importing data. We're going to talk about creating forms, scheduling and editing, and we'll talk about correcting forms as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed.
Thanks, Geneva, and welcome again, everyone, to our session today. I'm going to be demonstrating some items on the dashboard here for you in just a moment, but before that, just want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that we've got going on that Geneva had mentioned briefly there. One of the things that we have instituted, and this was primarily at the recommendation of some of our accountant and bookkeeper clients, but we also have some small business owner users who wanted to do this as well. From QuickBooks Desktop, we've for several years had the ability to import 1099 miscellaneous forms, and so the request had come to us, can you help us to import our W-2 forms as well, so that I can have all of my forms in one place, my W-2s for my employees and my 1099 miscellaneous for my contractors, so that I can store those PDF copies all in one place. I can e-file them all from one place and do all of those things there. So we instituted that this year. There is a W-2 import available from QuickBooks Desktop. That import capability is actually done by using the PDF copies of the W-2s that you create out of the QuickBooks Desktop payroll system. So you would just go through, you'd create those W-2s like you were going to print them out and send them out to an employee, and then you can import that PDF file directly into Tax 1099. We'll take it from there and process out the e-filing for you. You can still use that PDF copy to send to those recipients if you want to, but you could also use the PDF from Tax 1099. You could use the mailing service in Tax 1099 as well to send those W-2s out to your employees. So we're pretty excited about that feature and being able to offer some more form flexibility for our clients who are on QuickBooks Desktop. The second thing there on the list is some additional forms also relating to payroll. We've been doing 940, 941, 944, and 945 forms for various payroll tax type of employment tax reporting that you might have needed. We've been doing those for the last couple of years, and we've had a pretty continual request for doing the 941 corrected, the 941X that you see there. That's the quarterly corrected form, and we have added the capability for doing that this year. One significant difference with that one, the IRS doesn't accept an e-file for the 941X, so we do offer that form for you. You would complete the form, just print it out and mail it into the address noted on the PDF copy of the 941X form. And that is also available for prior years as well. So if you had to go back and do a correction for a quarter in a previous year, you could do that if you needed to. And then the 943 is mostly for agricultural clients, or it is for agricultural clients, people who might own a farm and need to report out their employment taxes through that 943 form. The next thing here is the dashboard enhancements. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into the dashboard enhancements. So we have several things that we've made modifications on, and similar to that W-2 import functionality that I mentioned before, this is based on feedback from users that we got from last year. Users pretty much across the board wanted some easier ways to find some information at a glance as they were working inside of Tax 1099, specifically relating to the status of their filings and what filings they might still need to go through and do a submission for. So we modified our dashboard pretty significantly to incorporate this information at a glance type of component so that you'd be able to see that information pretty easily. So when you're in the dashboard, and I'll show you that in just a moment, you'll be able to see the status of the forms, the date you last did something with a particular form, whether it was updating a form in that batch or submitting those forms, the date that maybe the acceptance came from the IRS. You'll be able to see the truncated taxpayer identification number for the payer as well as the payer's name, the total amount of those forms. So it's a nice cross check if you're coming out of QuickBooks or Xero or any other software, or even if you're just using spreadsheets to manage your business and want a total of what is being processed in that batch of 1099 forms, you'd be able to see that amount there as well. We have all the different form types represented in there. So if you're doing miscellaneous and div and W-2s and interest forms, you'd be able to see all of those, as well as the form counts for each batch and the date that they're scheduled to be delivered to the IRS. And then you can search and filter by the taxpayer identification number, by the name, by the form status, and by the year as well. So let's take a look at what that looks like, just so you can see what I'm talking about here as far as the dashboard. We did this actually a couple of weeks ago, and we sent an email out to all of our existing users just to let them know, kind of a heads up, that we were changing the dashboard, and it was going to be a fairly significant change. Now the dashboard is really the primary page that we've changed. Everything else behind there is very similar to what you would have seen last year, but the dashboard's pretty significantly different. You may remember from last year when you logged in, the first thing that you probably saw were a bunch of links in the middle of the page that looked like this. Those links are still there. They're just embedded up here in this blue plus sign for site actions now. And then there was a video, and then there were a couple of other little places that you could see, like your last 3 filings, the last 3 10 matches if you were using that, the last 3 W-9s if you were using that. So this year, we've really focused it in on the actual filings themselves. So what I've got here are a number of filings that I've done for 2017. And these are all test filings. That's why you can see test payer and class act kind of repeated with the names there. But I can see really quickly when I did that filing. I can see what the name of the payer, my client or company name is there. I can see what the amount in the total of those forms is, and you can see one form for each one of those. The 10,094 forms for this larger batch that I did here. You can see what type of form it is, and I can see the scheduled date, the date that it's going to go out to the IRS. I can even go in and view or print those forms if I wanted to. So again, just kind of giving you a real quick glance there of what you might expect. If you've been using our service for multiple years, you can look at all of your year's filing. So now I see I've got 65 items here. Can expand my page out so I can see more of those if I wanted to, or go from page to page here as well. I can also see what I've got that's not been submitted. So I can see anything in blue, and you'll see the little key down here, not submitted, submitted, and so forth. If I wanted to find a specific accepted filing, I could do that. If I wanted to find a specific accepted filing for a specific company from a specific year, I can go and I can drill in a lot of different ways to find those specific areas for my my filings that I might have done. So we're pretty excited about the dashboard changes, and of course this year we'll be looking for feedback on the dashboard changes after we go through the season, and looking for ways that we can improve it for next year as well, as we try to do every year, going in and making some improvements to the system. So that's the dashboard enhancements. I'm going to turn it over to Marcus now. He's going to talk to you a little bit about importing some of your data into Tax 1099.
Hello, everyone. This is Marcus, and like Ed said, I'll show you the import capabilities of Tax 1099, primarily with QuickBooks Desktop, and show you how we integrate, how you pull information from QuickBooks Desktop into our application, and then how you would complete the filing process once you have that information imported into our application. So from the dashboard here, I have got no activity for the current year here. There is, like Ed said, a place to start new filing. Over here, since we're going to import from QuickBooks Desktop, we'll go over here and we'll select QuickBooks Desktop. From here, you'll have two options. You'll have the option to install the plugin. This is for if you have a single instance of QuickBooks. So on the instance of my QuickBooks right here is just on my machine. And so if you have a license active on a workstation on a PC, you will want to install the plugin, and it will be a plugin, a file. You're going to get this ask if you want to import new data. So I'm going to start new. You don't have to do this every time. You just have to install this once per machine. Or if you have a QuickBooks instance installed on a local server. So say you have an office and you've got it installed on a server that goes out to multiple workstations, you would want to install this application on that server itself, and then it would distribute the plugin to all of the workstations. So it kind of varies by user. So it's a very simple installation process. It is exactly as it is here on the screen, just like installing any other application. If you have any firewall set up or antivirus, you may want to temporarily disable those to allow the action, because it is going to enhance QuickBooks, and those firewalls and antiviruses don't like when they're set up to block those. So you just temporarily disable that, and then you'll be able to install it here. You'll want to allow access to the company when you it's going to ask you yes. When you open a company or client file, you'll click yes when this client file is open, and then you want us to be able to access Social Security numbers as well. So that is a required field for filing 1099. So we're going to need that information there. So you're going to do that, and then you're going to authorize. Showing you what that looks like here, I'm going to open my QuickBooks, and once you install it, the plugin is going to live under the vendor tab here. And if you click the tax1099.com eFile, and then you'll hit the upload. And so that's as simple as that once you install it. I'm going to type in my username and password here, and then password. And I'll select the year that I want to bring over. So here we've got 17, 16, and 15 all available. So if you needed to go back and do some previous imports, that's very, very possible. So I'm going to select 17 and hit log in. And so what that will do is hit the password incorrectly. And once I hit login, what that is going to do, it's going to go through QuickBooks and find any 1099 information available therein. So you'll get this pop-up here that says it found 12 vendors. It just uploaded Dan though. So Dan was the only one that qualified. So he was the only one that had 2017 payments that was selected as a 1099 vendor in QuickBooks. And then he made over $600. So that was the only, for 2017. So that was the only person in my account that qualified. So he was the only one that was brought over by the system. Once I have this grid here, this is what we call the import grid. It's not officially in Tax 1099 yet. This is a staging area that allows you to look over any information that may need to be updated before you complete the import process. So here is the payer name. If that needs to be updated, you can select it here. You can make any updates as needed. If you're missing a required field here with an asterisk, it will prompt you with a warning that you'll need to complete that information before you can proceed, because it is required by the IRS to complete an e-filing. So if you need a phone number is one that is a common omission. You can type in the phone number there. And then another thing that we've added here is a client ID field. So maybe you have clients that have multiple companies, multiple EINs. You can put a client ID, maybe a client ID that your practice management software generates for you. You can put that directly into the system and then run a report based on that client ID to get all of the different payers out of the system. If you're doing a report to see what filings you did for a particular client and you wanted to go across company, you could give them the same ID there. It's not a required field, obviously, because that's not something IRS needs, but we allow you to import that or input that there to give you greater visibility across your clients. So I don't need to make any updates, so I'm just going to cancel. I could do the same thing with Dan here, update his name or EIN or social security number. Sometimes a lot of people ask us, well, what if I have a piece of that, it's a reimbursement that I need to take off? That's very easy. Or maybe there's a check outside of QuickBooks that someone wrote that's just captured in an email. You can easily edit here before you import. You can take off or add amounts to that. You can change the box. Maybe the mapping was not correct when you set it up in the wizard for QuickBooks, but I'm going to cancel. Everything looks correct here. I'm going to select all of my recipients here by selecting the payer, and I'm going to hit next. And now, once I did this, it is officially in the system. And so once it's in the system, I have my options of what I can do. I will need to select this box here on the left-hand side for e-filing. If I select this box, I could delete it if I wanted to. That box will need, that's how you could delete it if you wanted out of the system, if you realize you didn't need to import it yet. But that box will be what you select to move to the next submission page to e-file that with the IRS or possibly the state. If you want to mail through us, you can mail through our platform. Again, that's in a pressure-sealed envelope that has a barcode on it that you can track through the U.S. postal system. You can email if you have an email address. I do not have an email for Dan, but I could easily add an email address for him, and then I would be able to email him a copy of his 1099, and that will come from support at Tax 1099, and it will say on behalf of where it's coming from, and then they will be able to open that encrypted tax document with the instructions in the email. So the last four of their social security number, and there's a few different scenarios based on all the circumstances that could be present in their name and social security number. So the instructions there, it's information they'd only know, and then that's what would allow them to retrieve that document that's within that email. So I'm going to select United States Postal Service, mail, and then I'm going to e-file, of course. If I needed to do a state filing, this is where I would enter in that I wanted to file with the state. I'm not filing to a state that requires a state filing. I'm here either on a state that does not require personal income tax, or it is on the combined state and federal. So the IRS will then send the information to the state that needs this information. So if it was valid that I needed to, this would be an option to select, and I would select state filing, and then we will take care of the filing to that state revenue department. The last box here, oh, excuse me, I skipped over one. Here was the TIN match. The TIN match is a service that we provide. If you select TIN match, it will go to the IRS and it will check against their database if this name and tax identification number is valid. So if it's not valid, it will reject. If it is valid, it will be accepted. And so if it is rejected, you know that you'll need to do some sort of update to make sure that it doesn't get rejected by the IRS when you do file the tax information return. If it is accepted, that means yes, the IRS and what you have on your documentation is in agreement, so you can have confidence that they won't reject that form on the basis of having the name and the tax identification number not matching. So that is the TIN matching service that we provide. You can do that, and so you can TIN match before you file with the IRS. And that brings me to the last box here, is the scheduled date. So the scheduled date is what we how we allow you to pick the time that you want to file with the IRS. So right now, I could push this filing through for 2017. It won't go to the IRS until January 16, 2018, because that's the first day that the IRS is accepting 1099s. So I could actually submit this, and everything will take care of it. Everything will be taken care of, and Dan will get a mailed copy in his mailbox, and the IRS will get it submitted to him on the 16th. Just a note, when you hit submit on the next screen, and you have mail selected or email, the recipient receives that copy immediately. So we start the processing on mailing or send the email immediately once you do that submission. So they'll get that before the IRS scheduled date. So if you want to change the IRS scheduled date here, I can move it back here to, let's say, the 29th. So that'll give me a little more time if I hear of any information that's incorrect, so I won't have to do a corrected form. I can just update the date here. Maybe my client gets back to me and says, oh, that information was incorrect. That's not an issue. I don't have to do a filed corrected form. I just update the information here with edit, and then send Dan a new copy of his 1099. So that's what I'll do. I'll just move on here. I'm not going to do a TIN match. I'm just going to do a mail and eFile with a scheduled date for the 29th of January. It's giving me a warning here about our mailing policy, and then I will submit to eFile. And then you are completely done there with the eFile process. So that is the beginning to end process for importing through the QuickBooks plugin. If you did not want to do the plugin, if you're, say, on a hosted application, say Right Networks, Cloud9, some of the others, what you want to do is install our plugin. I'll go over you'll install the web connector. So I'm going to start a new import here, and then with the web connector, something to note with the web connector, you will want the instance of QuickBooks and the client file open when you install the web connector if you're using that. So I've got the same company here, and so I'm going to continue and say download here. I'm going to get a file that will open up on my downloads folder. I'm going to click OK. Okay, and then I'm going to follow the instructions on the screen here that are very simple here. I'm going to click this box here. I'm going to type in my password once again. And then I am going to I'm not going to save my password. I can. So I will hit OK, and then I'll hit update selected. All right, and then I will exit here, and then I'll go to my QuickBooks. And what will happen is I will get, once I got that 100% notification here in the documentation, I will get an email, or I can go back up here. I'll get an email here, or I did not receive a Web Connector sync confirmation email. So that's what you can do, and clicking that will bring that information over. So this is what the email will look like, and then this will be a hyperlink here to complete your filing process. So once I've got QuickBooks open, that's all good, everything looks great. I'll go here and just click this right here, and that same information comes over once again. So 2 different ways to do it. And if you're using that hosted solution type framework, you will want to open up the client file, go through that process that I just did to import your data. So you'll just click that file, have the file open that you pull down from your hosted provider, and then install the Web Connector, and it will allow you to run through the process of importing data. So we've had a request to show the W-2 import process. It is not a full integration, but it allows you to file eFile on behalf of your clients through QuickBooks with the information QuickBooks provides. So it's similar to an Excel import, if any of you are familiar with importing bulk information from Excel, but we're going to be importing bulk information from a PDF file. So I've got the file right here that that I've generated. Excuse me, let me bring it on screen. And here is just 2 W-2 forms, and here we've got all the different copies, the 3 different copies that QuickBooks generates when you go through the payroll process of generating paper forms on QuickBooks. So I've got this information here. I'm going to select a file, and then I'll select that same file here. We just call it W-2 for testing. And that is exactly what is exported out of QuickBooks. So I'll hit next once I get 100% import there. And then here is a pre-staging. It's not the import grid, but it's just making sure that the boxes are coming over correctly. Here it's just the first of, if this has 2, but maybe someone has more than 1, you can kind of see how it's going to pull in. I need to select the kind of pair. I'm just going to do regular and none apply. That sounds good. Everything looks good here for me. I'm going to hit next. Here is my payer, and here is the 2 W-2s that I need to do. And here is a good way for me to showcase that we have insufficient payer information. So I need to click on that. We've got a red dot, and it looks like we've got a missing phone number here. So let me enter in a phone number and click update, and that will allow me to have all the information I need for the filing. So I'll select the payer information here as well. Okay, I've got 2 records uploaded. I'm going to check out, and that will take me to the View, Edit, Submit page that I showed you before. You can get back to this by clicking View, Edit, Submit. If I just left the page and went back to my dashboard, I can get back to this, and I'll just show you that right now. I'll go to View, Edit, Submit, or I can click on my dashboard there. So I'll select W-2, and then I'll select my company, my year and company, and it's 2016. And there is my W-2s again. So even if you kind of leave it as a work in process, need to stop and go to something else, you can get back to it very easily. You can have all the functionality that you need here, as well as I showed you in the previous 1099 example of importing it from QuickBooks. One question we get a lot, speaking of W-2s and 1099s, is how do we do a correction? That is something that is very easy to do with our platform. You'll go here, even if you need to go back the current year -3, you can do a correction for any of the forms that we offer going back the current year and going back 3 years prior. So I'll just do a 1099 correction here. It's super simple. All you need to do is select the name of the company that you need to do. So I'll select Rock Castle here. I only have one recipient under that company, but if I had 30 or 200, whatever, I could do a quick find here to find the person that I filed a form for. If you don't have a person, say it's someone that was not on the platform last year, you can easily add another recipient right here and do a corrected. There's no requirement that you have to file the original on our platform to do the corrected. So I've got the information here, and I'm going to select the corrected box. And it says enter corrected amounts in the box previously reported incorrectly. So I'm pretending, let's say it's just a 1099 miscellaneous for a void form, enter 0 amounts. So you can void a form as well as just update it. This one is just an update. Say I entered in a wrong amount. So it was not $750 like the previous example demonstrated. It was $650. And so I can enter it here. And then once I hit save and continue, it'll take me to that view, edit, submit page that I've showed you twice before. If you needed to do a wrong information, you could do the send a form with the 0 amounts with the previous information, and then file another form with the correct information. So this one was an incorrect amount that I'm demonstrating, but if I needed to change something here, I could change something in his name or taxpayer identification number, 0 that amount out with just a 0 in that box, and then issue a new form with the correct recipient information or payer information with the correct amount. So that is how that would work. I don't need to complete that, so I'm just going to cancel that right now. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ed, and he's going to talk about what happens once you schedule a form for filing, or if it's been a little time since you filed and you want to go back, maybe send a copy, someone requesting an additional copy or something like that of forms that you have filed for previous years, or that if you have scheduled to file for the current year.
Thanks, Marcus. And so I'm going to cover a little bit here about the Manage Forms page. I've got a few things that I want to share with you there, including rescheduling those forms, working through that process as you might need to, and what else we can do on the Manage Forms. So the Manage Forms page is a place we get a lot of questions about that, and we get a lot of questions because people aren't sure where to go to find these. So as Marcus indicated, after you have clicked the Submit option and you've filed your forms, you've got them scheduled out, you're ready to send the mail, all that's been done, you've made your payment, all the forms are going to go under this Manage Forms page. So it's a pretty significant page, pretty important page as far as what you can do with your forms once you've completed your filing process. So we're going to spend some time looking at that, seeing how you can deliver those vendor forms, download the PDFs, make edits if the forms are still scheduled. So there'll be a couple of things that we're going to look at that will be pretty important here as you're working through your filing process. So I'm still on the dashboard where we had started before. And so I'm going to go under my Forms menu here, and I'm going to click on the Manage Forms page that you see right here. The Manage Forms page is what we call the area where the forms have already been submitted, so they've gone here to live, if you will, once they've completed their process. And I've got 3 tabs up here. We had a question come up in the chat a little bit ago about state forms. So those would be here if it's a state that does not participate in the combined federal state filing process, like Pennsylvania or in Oregon. So if you're paying us to do something additional with that state filing, they would be here in the Manage State Forms section. I'm going to focus primarily, though, on the federal forms, and there are 2 segments here. There's the 1099s, the W-2s, the 1095s, and so forth. And then below that, there are the 940s, 941s, and so on. So you could do different things depending on what type of form you're looking for. The vast majority of you are going to be looking at your 1099s or your W-2s, and so I'm going to focus on that area here. You may only have one payer company in your select payer list. If you're an accountant or bookkeeper, though, you may have a whole bunch of them. And so, like you, I have a whole bunch here. If you are an accountant or bookkeeper, you can go back. You can look at these from prior years. So if I click back into 2015, then I've got all of my forms here that I filed in the tax year of 2015. I can do the same things that I'm going to show you here in just a moment for 2017 forms on the 2015 forms. So we keep them for you so that you've got access to them for 7 years out here in the site. If not in the site, then we've got them archived for those 7 years and can get them for you to appear back in the site if you happen to need them. So I'm going to look at some 2017 test filings that I've done here. I've got 2 for Joe Smith. I've got 1 for Julie Carpenter. You can see they're all on different reference numbers. So I submitted them in separate instances. I know sometimes our newer users are a little concerned about submitting more than one time to the IRS, or they're concerned that the IRS is going to get upset about them submitting more than one submission for a payer. The IRS does not care at all. As long as you're e-filing, you could do, if you had 20 forms, you could do each of them in single form submissions. So you'd have 20 different submissions. The IRS would be very happy with that if you're e-filing. They would not be so happy with that if you sent them 20 separate 1096s and 1099s with separate forms on a paper filing. But on the e-file side, they're perfectly okay with that. I'm looking at these 2 for Joe Smith, and so I've got one that's already submitted to the IRS, but I've got one that's scheduled. And so there's a pretty big difference in what I can do with those 2 forms. Marcus mentioned editing the form. If you discover that Joe had some error on his form, maybe he was paid $5,000 and you would put $6,000 on the form, that's something that I would want to edit. However, I can only edit a form that has a future dated scheduled date to go to the IRS. So once the date of this form arrives, I can no longer do any edits to that form. However, because this one is scheduled out January 31st, I can simply click edit and I can go in and I can make any changes that I need to for Joe's form. That's because this has not been filed to the IRS, so you don't have to do a corrected form filing. You don't have to do any of those extra steps. You would just come in and make whatever the change is for Joe's form. So I've got him at $5,000. Let's say it was actually supposed to be $6,000. So I'll just click in $6,000 there. Maybe I had his address wrong. I can click edit for Joe's information. I can edit Joe's address information there. So I have a lot of opportunity to work with this form as long as it's in a scheduled format. I'm going to click Save and Continue, and this is going to update that form that I was working on for Joe. And because it's scheduled, that actual change that I just made from $5,000 to $6,000 is what will go to the IRS on January 31st. So I would be able to make sure up to that date that I can do any of those changes possible, even up to sending out Joe a new form. So let's say Joe happened to walk into my workplace and said, "Hey, this is wrong," and wanted a copy right away. I can print one and hand it to Joe. I can print one and fold it up and put it into a number 10 double window envelope and send it to Joe. This is what it looks like here. This is your return address. So this is your company name that's up here. If you're an accountant, it's your client's name that will be up there. This is Joe's information here. So it folds up, goes right into that double window envelope, and you can see that the change that I made is reflected on that PDF. So it is as immediate as that. Once you make the change, you can send out a new copy. Other ways you could get a copy of that form to Joe, and Marcus mentioned this as he was going through his checkout process. So you can email, or you can U.S. Postal Service mail the forms out to Joe or any of the other recipients as you're going through that checkout process. But if you didn't do it then, if you wanted to submit it and then maybe hold on to them for a little while, you can come back here and you can do it here. This is doing for an individual. I'll talk in a minute about what these blue buttons do, because you can do all these tasks on a bulk basis as well. So if I want to send an email copy of this to Joe, let's say he's not in my office, he just called me on the phone and said, "Hey, this is wrong," I can do that. Now for Joe, I don't actually have an email address that's been created. When I imported Joe's information, or when I created Joe's information manually, I did not get the chance to, or I did not put in an email address. the system knows that, and so it'll ask me to supply the email address. If I've got Joe on the phone, he gives me his email address. I type it in, I click OK, and a minute or so later, Joe gets that emailed form out in his inbox. So pretty easy for getting that out there. If I wanted to do a mailed copy, I would just click USPS mail. We do charge for that. It's $1.50 per form, and the mailed copies are pressure sealed forms. We have a bit of a tracking on them, so you can see that they're going through the postal service. So you can reassure the vendor that it should be there pretty soon. You can see what its latest location was. You don't get a signature for Joe to sign to say that he received it, but you can see that it was in the local post office at some point in time. So you can kind of work with that process for Joe. So lots of different things that you can do for Joe's form there. I'm going to bring Joe's form back up for just a second and point out something here. The recipient identification number, that's a social or an EIN. We do truncate that social security number or EIN. That's based on the IRS's recommendation for data security. They are really getting, I guess, stronger about their wording in that process. They want you as a payer to protect your recipient's data as much as possible and include that truncated number. You may have a recipient who wants to see that number. As long as that number, as long as that form is scheduled like this one is, I could unmask that taxpayer identification number, and then I could produce a PDF copy for Joe that would have the full 9 digits of his social security number on it, or his EIN, as the case may be. I can also search if I wanted to do something individually for one of these people. So, I'm only looking at 3 people. It's pretty easy to scroll through that. But if you've got 20 or 50 or 10,000 or 100,000, like some of our clients do, then you will definitely want to take advantage of the search box. You can just go in, easily type in that person's name and find whoever you're looking for there. So let's talk about the blue buttons that I mentioned. These are the bulk activities. So if I wanted to print all of these at one time, I don't want to go through and print Joe's form and Julie's form and Johnny's form. I want to do them all at one time. So I can submit that request. I'll see this come up as a zip file. When I click OK, it's going to open up my zip file, and I have one PDF that has all 3 of those forms on it. Now, you may have the situation where you have 20 or 50 or 100. That will take a little bit longer than that, than what I just showed. You may even get an email with a link in it to download these forms, but they will all be in the same type of process. You get a zip file. You have all of the different forms available in that single zip file. Separately, you may want to save different copies for each one of those individuals. You may want to create a separate PDF for Joe and a separate PDF for Julie. That's what this download multiple does. It gives you the capability of separating those out into different PDF file copies, just like you see here, and it'll be identified with their name. And since Joe had a couple, he's identified with the different numbers, and you see Julie has a number there as well. So it just tags a number for each one of those forms. I can export this to Excel. That's a pretty good feature for a couple of different reasons. One is if you're an accountant or bookkeeper, you may just want to be able to provide this type of data to your client and have it out there in a format that they can readily see. It's got all of your payer information up to here. It's got all of your recipient information up to here. And if I scroll over, it's got my box number information. This is box 7 for all of that. And it's got my form status out here as well. So you can see all of the different boxes that might appear in a spreadsheet format. That's a pretty easily readable spreadsheet format. The other nifty thing about this export is, let's say you filed with Tax 1099 last year, and I'm looking at 2017, but just pretend I'm looking at 2016. I could download, export all of that to Excel, and then I could use this file as my import file. So this guy didn't make 6,000 this year, they made 8,000. This one didn't make 7,000, they made 4,000. But whatever the changes are, I could put that information into this Excel spreadsheet, and then I could go in and I could use that Excel import that you can see here to just upload that information pretty easily, pretty quickly into the software. So if you're, for whatever reason, not using QuickBooks, you're not using a Bill.com, you're not using one of our other integrated partners, you want to do an Excel import, you've already got the data here, you can simply add that in and do this process that I just showed. USPS mail, so if I want to send all these out at one time, I can do that. The email, I can send all of those. Bulk 10 unmask and mask, so I could unmask all of these for creating the PDF copies, send them out, and I could remask them if I wanted to. Blocking the submission will block all of the forms in an individual filing. So let's say all three of these had the same reference number. If I choose to block, they will block all three of those forms. You can't just block one. If you just need to do one, say somebody was a C corporation and you notified them and they complained about it, you can come back in. You could do a corrected form like Marcus demonstrated before for that process. And so just checking the box at the top of the form will enable you to do a corrected form. Voiding it out is just simply entering zeros for that form. And by the way, if you did have that situation, if you filed for a C corporation, it's not a problem. The IRS is not going to get anyone in trouble over that. Just sometimes that C corporation itself worries a little bit, but the IRS doesn't have any problem with receiving a C corporation form from you. The other thing you can do here is change the scheduled date. So I'm going to click that button. So let's say I've got Joe's filing there. I know it was for January 31st. I'm going to cancel that for a second. It's for January 31st. It's scheduled right now, but let's say that it's January 30th right now, and Joe and I are kind of going back and forth. He's saying, no, that's not the right amount. I'm saying, yes, it is. He says, no, it's not. We have receipts, we've got canceled checks. We're looking at all these things to try to figure it out. I might want to file an extension, and Tax1099 offers extensions. They're under the new form section here. It's called an 8809. So you can file an extension for your 1099 miscellaneous. Gives you an automatic 30-day extension. So for Joe's 1099 miscellaneous with the box 7 amount, that means I can extend it out to March the 2nd. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the reference number with Joe's form. I'm going to pick that. And so just like you saw in Marcus's demonstration when he went through and he was showing you what that looked like. And by the way, notice that I can't go past March 2nd because the system is smart enough to know that's a box 7 amount. And so I'm only going to allow the user to go to March the 2nd. So I can see that March 2nd date. I can change it. That gives me another 30 days to make modifications to this form, to come back in and be able to edit this form, and the IRS won't expect me to e-file it. Once I do that, I'm going to get this pop-up that's going to say, hey, I agree that I'm selecting a date past the deadline date. We talk about filing the 8809, making sure that you've got that, and I'll click OK. And now my schedule date is successfully changed, and I will have that extra 30 days to argue with Joe. I like to argue with Joe, so I'm just going to take all 30 days and argue with Joe over that form, and then finally I'll get it sorted out and do whatever needs to be done for Joe. One final button that's here, this View 10 option. I want to distinguish that from the unmasking of the 10. The View 10 just simply shows you what the taxpayer identification number is here in this EIN field for Joe. So you can see is whether it's a social or an EIN or whatnot. It doesn't actually unmask it on the PDF. That's what this unmask option is for here in this section. All right, so I have covered all the manage form areas there. I know we were responding to some questions that had been coming up. I'm going to pass it back over to Geneva to bring up any of the other questions that we might need to get to. And obviously, if we're not able to get to all of the questions today, we will reply to those in an email separately.
Thanks, Ed, and thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We've had quite a few really great ones. We've had a lot of questions about our QuickBooks Online import. I'm going to hand that over to Marcus, and he'll show you how that can be accomplished.
Yes, Ed, if you would give me access to the screen.
My apologies, there you go.
All right, so with QuickBooks Online, you can import very much the same way as Desktop, but it is even better because as QuickBooks Online is a cloud-based platform, it will allow you to do this without installing any plugins or any web connectors, as our two applications just talk to each other through the web. So it's very easy, very handy to use. I have already signed in. If you go here to import, you'll click QuickBooks Online, and I'll show you what you would be greeted with here by clicking on 0 here. I'm sorry to have to show 0, but it would ask you to connect, and it would ask for a email and password. You would enter in your email and password for your QuickBooks Online account, which I have done here, and it would give you this screen once you do that. So you enter in your QBOA account. If you're not a QBOA user, you just have an instance of QuickBooks Online that you need to file 1099s for. You would enter in that username and password, and then it will allow you to select the year, very much the same way as we were doing there in QuickBooks Desktop. So I'm going to select 2017, and then I've got all my companies under my QBOA account here that I can select from. I'm going to select company 1, and then I'm going to proceed. And I've done this before, so it's saying, hey, do you want to start a new import? I'll just start a new import to show you what that's like from the beginning. Here is the mapping feature. Just a clarification here with QuickBooks Desktop, you can set up when you go through the 1099 wizard and you set up how the chart of accounts maps to each particular box on a 1099. That all comes over with the import on desktop. For online, there is no persistent chart of accounts mapping feature. Some people may have experienced the mapping feature when they do QuickBooks Online's 1099 service. That is an application separate from QuickBooks Online, so it doesn't persist. It doesn't keep that chart of account information saved to that client. So you'll need to do the mapping here for that client. It's very simple. I'm going to select box 7 and select the chart of account expense accounts that want to be inputted to that box. So there I have it, and I have no other boxes I need, but if I did, it would be very simple to map those over, and that's going to be persistent again across all the different accounts for that client. So it'll bring in everything, any payments for any vendors, and put them in the right boxes. So I'll hit next, and then it gives me that screen that is a pre-import screen. So I've got 2 red indicators here that I have insufficient information for both my company and my payer here. I don't have a social security number, so I need to enter in a social security number here for this person, and I will add that in. We'll say it's not a social security number, but it's actually a business here because this is a business, so I need to do that. You can also, something that people may not be aware of our application is you can do an address validation. So you can do the address validation here, and it will, when I hit update, it will say, hey, here is the address you entered. Here is what the U.S. Postal Service recommends. You can take that recommendation. It looks to be very close. So this is actually the New York Stock Exchange's address, so we know that it's valid. So I could update that and say, yeah, I'll go with the recommended, and then that gets updated. And then again, I think I'm missing a phone number here with my vendor, or excuse me, with my client. And then if I want to enter a client ID, I can. I'll update, and everything is good. And then I'll select that I want to bring over Zeus's beard supply, and I will continue. Again, you can make edits before you import, and this is the screen that you would receive before you go to the submission stage. It does have a email associated with it, so it has a option here. It's automatically selected with the email, and then you can deselect that, though. There is no cost with that, so no, it's not going to cost you if it goes through with that selected. I won't go to the next page because we've demonstrated that already here today, but that is how the QuickBooks Online integration works. A lot of our users are also have their clients set up on Bill.com. I'm going to say that Bill.com is almost the exact same way, with a caveat that you enter in with the Bill.com information instead of your QuickBooks Online or Tax1099 information. So you want to enter in the instance of Bill.com you have, and then it's going to bring over the information from Bill.com as well. So a lot of people ask us, oh, if you have Bill.com or desktop or online, you probably wouldn't have them on desktop and online, but you will high likelihood of maybe having them on Bill.com and QuickBooks Desktop. Use the information that is the most accurate. It's going to pull, if you have the exact same information in both, it's going to pull the exact same information. It's not going to be different. If you don't want to install the app, but you have someone on Bill.com, you can use Bill.com. It's going to pull everything over, but obviously the most important thing is to have the information where it is the most correct. And so it's preference after that. And so with that, I will give Geneva control again to ask some questions or follow up with some questions that have been asked.
Thanks, Marcus. Another question that we got is, can you explain the difference between the web connector and the plugin? Which would be the best to use if you have multiple clients? Ed, would you like to talk about that one?
Yeah, I could talk about that. So there is not a difference really in the web connector and the plugin as far as what comes over from QuickBooks Desktop. But the difference is how your QuickBooks is set up. Are you hosted through a Right Networks or Cloud9 or InSync or someone like that? If you are, then most likely the web connector is going to be the easiest and most efficient manner for you to bring that information over. We are in conversations with Intuit and the hosting services to make sure that all that works well. We actually have a call with them tomorrow to talk through that process. And their recommendation for hosted clients is that you use the web connector. Another instance where you may want to use the web connector is if you are in an environment, computer environment, I should say, that has a pretty strict firewall requirement. The plugin is an exe file. It's an executable file, and firewalls, antivirus software, they don't like that. They're trying to protect your computer from executable malicious files, which is not what the plugin is, but that's what they're trying to protect you against. And so you either have to disable your firewall or antivirus temporarily to install the plugin, or you can use the web connector. So it really is dependent on your situation. The information that comes to us from QuickBooks Desktop is the same, regardless of what your method is for bringing that over, web connector or plugin.
Great, thanks for that, Ed. Another question is, can you talk about the 8809, Form 8809? Who needs to file that form?
Yeah, so no one actually needs to file the 8809. It's an optional form. The 8809 is an extension. If you have any doubt whatsoever about the correctness of your numbers for your 1099 forms, and that could be you just have one person who the amount might not be right. You have one person who maybe your tax payer identification number, that you know how this is, right? They haven't completed the W-9, even though you've called them 400 times this year. They haven't completed the W-9. That might be a situation where you want to request an extension to give yourself 30 more days to do that. You can file the 8809 inside of Tax 1099. There's paper forms available for doing that as well. The advantage to doing it in Tax 1099, like with other forms, is that you get a response from the IRS saying that it has been accepted. The paper form, you just mail it off and hope that the IRS gets it, and hope that you've actually got that 30-day extension and aren't filing late when you are able to file. The 30-day extension is applicable for the 1099 miscellaneous and some other 1099 forms. It is not applicable for the W-2s. W-2s have to be filed by the January 31st deadline. So the form 8809 will let you know that as you're kind of going through the processing of that form. And the 30 days is applicable for both box 7, which gives you to that March 2nd date, since that deadline is January 31st. And for the other boxes on the miscellaneous form, you would get to April the 30th because their due date is March 31st for the eFile form. So that 8809 just gives you some extra time, gives you some extra comfort level with being able to get your data correct before it is submitted to the IRS.
Okay, thank you for that. Probably a last question here. We're getting some questions about the Form 1096. What's changed with that now that we have the e-filing? Can you talk about that a little bit, Ed?
Yeah, so eFile just simply replaces the 1096. There is no 1096 that's required when you do an eFile. So same thing with your W-2s and W-3. The eFile replaces the W-3. So those forms, the 1096, the W-3, those are called transmittal forms, and they are a compilation form that you send on top of your stack of paper forms when you send them to the IRS or the Social Security Administration. The eFile takes that away, and the IRS really appreciates that, because otherwise they have to hand scan those paper forms in. They have to hand reconcile those paper forms. It takes them months and months just to get the data entered into their system, and so they're not aggressively pushing, but they're certainly requesting that people move to eFile more rapidly. And so the eFile replaces that 1096 and W3. It makes the IRS's life easier, makes your life easier as well. We do offer a copy of a 1096 in case you just wanted it for your records, but it's stamped across the front of it, or watermarked across the front of it. Do not file, because it is simply a way for you to see what the summary is of the filings that you did.
Okay, thanks again to Ed for introducing some of our platform updates, our new dashboard and its enhancements, our new forms, and thanks to Marcus for walking us through the import process. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. We're so glad that we can talk about filing season processes with you. If you have any questions, we'll be answering those by email following up with that. We'll be sending out a reminder about when the recording is posted to our webpage, so be looking out for that. Thanks again for joining, and have a great day.